Who are we? What are we doing? We are here at Rebel Saints Meditation Society in Seattle. My name's Rachael. Hey, everybody. And I'm streaming live here from Seattle for Against the Stream Meditation Society. So our meditation societies are, we give talks, streaming live. So usually we have a room full of people here in Seattle. And as you know, we are still in the time of the COVID pandemic. So we don't have anyone at the Meditation Society and we're streaming live. And I know in LA right now, they can have some people meet and then the rest of it is streamed out on the internet. So we can sit together as a Sangha. And, you know, I've heard a lot of people tell me they don't like Zoom. I understand. I get it. And it's pretty miraculous that we get to do this. Really, that's my attitude about it. Like, this is incredible that we get to sit in our living rooms. We get to sit on our couch or whatever, and not only, hear some teachings, but meditate together as a group. So I get it. It's not ideal. It's not how we all want it to be, right? I understand. Welcome to reality. So I encourage people to join on Zoom and to sit together. I remember when I started to practice, I had to travel. I had to travel very far to get teachings, and the best we had back then in the old days was we'd trade tapes. Like we'd have tapes of teachings that we'd pass around and get to listen to. So glad you guys are all here and that you're not too cool for Zoom. So this morning, I will give a talk. We'll do some meditation practice together. I'll guide you in a meditation practice based on the talk. And then we will have some time for discussion together. This morning, the subject is equanimity. What is that? It's not something necessarily a word that we hear all the time, equanimity. We do once we start hanging out in the meditation scene. And this equanimity is one of the heart practices called the Brahma Viharas, the sublime abidings, the sublime abodes. What else do they call the Brahma Viharas? The heavenly abodes. So it sounds pretty good, right? So these are states of mind, attitudes that we can dwell in, we can abide in, we can hang out in. And so to be able to do this, some of it comes kind of naturally, but to be able to do this, we need training, we need practice, we need an attitude adjustment. Many of us, me for sure. Just if you want to know, just ask Joseph, my partner. Attitude adjustment. That's what got me to starting to meditate in the first place. So these Brahma Viharas, divine dwellings, we train in meditation, and they're loving kindness, compassion, appreciative joy, and equanimity. So equanimity is this attitude or state of mind that can respond to whatever is happening with wisdom. And what that means is can respond to whatever's happening without making it worse, without making ourselves suffer about it, what's happening. Now, it doesn't mean that everything that's happening is all good. I think this is an important point, that doesn't mean we just acceptance of what's happening and of our experience doesn't mean that we like it, doesn't mean that it's pleasant, doesn't mean that it's just, doesn't mean that it's cool. It's not saying, we're not saying that. Acceptance and responding in a wise way to what's happening doesn't mean that we just don't do anything to make positive change in the world, or that we don't care about what's happening. We care deeply about what's happening in our world and what's happening with ourselves and what's happening with the people we love and the people around us. This mind of equanimity is able to respond well, meaning in a way that's helpful, in a way that contributes to less suffering for ourselves and others. Another definition of the word equanimity is the seventh factor of awakening. And the way I see it, that is, it's to me seen as the goal of the practice. If we're wondering what it means to be enlightened or liberated, what's it going to be like? That, I think, a good clue. I don't know. I'm not a liberated being. I have moments of liberation, though, for sure. Through my practice, I have moments where I know I'm liberated from suffering. But I'm not continually abiding in that place. I'm not claiming to be that. I have more and more moments of liberation the longer I've been practicing and the more skilled I get. But that this is the seventh factor awakening. Maybe this is what it feels like to be enlightened. Maybe this is what it feels like to be liberated, is to be able to know how to respond wisely to whatever's happening. Whatever's happening in our experience. So that's kind of the general view of what equanimity is. Today, I'm going to focus on the meditation practice, giving some reflections on the meditation practice in the book Refuge Recovery. And I often use this book. I think it's brilliant. Whether you're identify yourself as whether you're an addict or not, I think this book is a great introduction and actually quite profound practice of the Four Noble Truths, the Eightfold Path, and the heart practices. It's laid out in a simple way that we can practice easily, I think. Meaning the instructions are simple. So in this meditation, there's 3 phrases that are to be repeated in meditation, like a mantra or a statement of positive intention, repeated quietly, mentally in our mind to cultivate this attitude of equanimity. And as you hear the phrases, and some of you know them, as you hear these phrases, it will give a clue, I think, to the goal of the practice. So I'll talk about each phrase, give some reflection on it, and then we'll do some practice together. Okay, so the first phrase is, all beings are responsible for their own actions. So this first phrase points to the teaching on karma. And there's lots of different views about what karma is and how does it work and all that kind of stuff. I think the most important, at least for me, the most important practical understanding of karma is just that it means action. That karma means action. It's just the word for action. And action with what we do with our body, speech, and mind. actions, volitional actions, actions that we're doing on purpose with intention. That is karma. So actions, and then there's effects, the effects of our actions. And that's, as we know, there's lots of effects to our actions. And I think it can be important to, I think the most important thing is to understand that there are effects to our actions, that there is causes and conditions, actions and effects. And here, I think the point is that we're responsible for our actions. And that is a big quality of the Buddha's teachings, is that we are responsible for ourselves. Now, often we want to be responsible for stuff we're not really responsible for. Sometimes people get, really take too much responsibility for what's not their stuff and other people's stuff, but not enough for our own. So this path, these teachings are getting us to turn toward our own experience and our own life, and to take responsibility for what we can take responsibility for with it, which is actually quite a bit. The Eightfold Path is a investigation of all the areas of our life to question, investigate, and see where we're taking responsibility and where we're not. And the thing that I think is so empowering and important about this path of radical personal responsibility that the Buddha taught is if a lot of what is happening concerning suffering, if whether I suffer or not has to do with my actions and it's my responsibility, then right on, because then I can do something about it. Right? Then I have some, if it's my responsibility, all right. We relying on other people, very uncertain and stable, but we can change something within ourselves or keep doing something that's working. So we're responsible for our own actions. What we decide to do on purpose, we will get the effects. So I like it because it makes sense to me. It makes sense that if I do an action, then a certain kind of effect is going to happen, that there's no like puppeteering, God doling out punishments and rewards. It's just literally cause and effect. And whatever I cause, I'm responsible for that. I can live with that. That makes sense to me. It's not always easy. It's not always pleasant. I might have some regret that I have to deal with and, some mess to clean up. Sure. But then I'm in more control about owning my life. So I'm responsible, and here all beings are responsible for their actions. That means me, and that means everybody else is responsible for theirs. So we all have to own what we do. And I think if we reflect, we can see that that's true. That whatever actions we take in our life, we experience the results of it. And sometimes people talk about karma in future lives. And that may or may not be true. What's great is you don't have to even decide about that. If you believe in future lives, fine. If you don't, fine. This teaching to me is more about this life. This life and this moment to moment experience that we have. And it said that that's what the Buddha discovered was cause and effect. That's one of the things he explained. I mean, karma they had talked about before in India, but this goes into the 12 dependent related links, this moment to moment cause and effect, and then lifetime to lifetime. But that this causes that he was able to see the chain of cause and effect. And I see this a lot. I've been in recovery for many years. And the 12-step process, I'm in refuge recovery. I participate in refuge recovery now for years, and I still really admire and believe in the 12-step process. One of the things about it that I think is so important is there's this inventory process, and then we do what we can in that process to take responsibility for our part in causing harm for ourselves and others. And I've seen so many people come in with guilt and shame and regret and just like torching their lives down and hurting people behind addiction in ways that they, never wanted to do. But addiction will take over and take charge for sure. And piecing it out and checking it out through the inventory process and seeing like, okay, what's my part? What's not my part? What can I do to make it right? And I've seen people come in with just barely able to make eye contact, just trashed with the things they've done. And through the process of taking personal responsibility for what they could and then making amends. And for some of the amends that people have to make when they get in recovery, some is just paying back some money, and some is like a lifetime of living amends. But I see people start to, hold their head up high and regain dignity and pride and self-esteem and all of that through owning their part and taking responsibility for their actions. And I've seen relationships that looked like they were not gonna ever reconcile or ever get better. I've seen amazing, and they call it miracles. I've seen miracles, but to me, it's not a miracle. It's certainly not a miracle that's, in my opinion, bestowed upon. This is a miracle coming from hard work, looking at difficult stuff, taking responsibility, and doing whatever we can to make it right. So cool. Really. And this is that same kind of idea. I'm responsible for my own actions. Others are responsible for their actions. All right. And just, I'm briefly touching on each one of these phrases. I can give each one as its own teaching for sure. Okay, the next one is suffering or happiness is created through one's relationship to experience, not by experience itself. Suffering or happiness is created through one's relationship to experience, not by experience itself. So this is another pillar or important thing to me in the Buddhist teachings that make it so radical. The Buddha taught that it's not the conditions that give rise to suffering. And what he means by suffering is, again, the difference between pain and suffering. Pain is unavoidable, just the pain of human life. Suffering is the extra layer of misery we put on top of the pain we cannot avoid. Happiness, which here means like an inner peace or a sense of ease, whether we have a sense of ease or happiness about a condition, doesn't depend. The Buddha is saying it doesn't depend on the condition itself. It depends on our reaction to what's happening. Again, doesn't mean that what's happening is a-okay in the world. There's tons of injustice, poverty, pain that could totally be avoided and released if certain conditions were in place, right, for our society. Like, there's major problems, as we know. Major. When we can have a sense of equanimity, if we see conditions as they are in the world and in ourselves, and we suffer about them, if we make ourselves miserable about them, doesn't mean we're not sad and we're not in pain, but if we make ourselves miserable, we can't be effective in making positive change. Whether it's in the world or in our own life. And on the other side, suffering or happiness. So this mind of equanimity knows how to respond wisely. So the wise response to pain, injustice, cruelty, greed, hatred, and delusion is compassion. When it hurts, compassion is the way to not suffer about what hurts. On the other side, happiness. So how often do we take what's pleasurable in our life, what's pleasant, the good things? I talk a lot about the pain of the world, but there's also a lot of beautiful things as well. So how do we respond to what we love, what we like, what's enjoyable, what's beautiful? So we can ruin that too. We can suffer about that too, if we want, by clinging. How often do we get something beautiful and then we just cling on to it and we can't enjoy it? So the Buddha taught whether we're suffering or we're happy or at ease, it depends on our response. It depends on our reaction, not what's actually happening. So we can hold what's happening and be able to respond wisely. So the way to respond wisely to all the things we normally get attached to and cling to is non-attached appreciation. We practice appreciating it, enjoying it, and doing our best, right, with practice to not cling, to not squeeze all the joy out of it because we're so worried it's going to pass. We're going to lose it. And I think the Buddha was such an amazing example of showing that the conditions aren't the cause of our suffering or happiness based on the way he lived. For 40 years, he lived barefoot, outside, walking around, teaching with only, one set of robes, begging for food, homelessness, poverty, no relationship, meaning, celibacy, no intimate relationship. So sometimes we think, oh, I'm suffering because I don't have the partner, or I'm suffering because I don't have, this or that. And I think it's so great that he showed it's not based necessarily on material things. He had all the material things. So we can just check for ourselves, you know, how is it for us? How often do we get whipped around and are in a state of like reactivities based on conditions, the outside conditions? Does suffering or happiness depend on outside conditions for us? What happens when we don't get what we want? What happens when people don't act the way we want? What happens when we lose what we have? When conditions change in a way we don't prefer, how do we respond? So that's for us to investigate and check and try not to judge ourselves too harshly about. And just take this honest assessment, like this inventory. Okay, where am I at with this? My example for this, the little example is my partner and my partner Joseph, I'm more attached to food and how it is and how it tastes and everything. And he's a little bit more like, he'll just roll with whatever. I mean, he likes nice food and good food and everything, but he doesn't get bitchy when the food's not right. He's really easygoing that way. Me, on the other hand, I've had to work on this. You know, if they're out of the thing that I want when I go to get it, or I'm thinking, oh, I just really want enchiladas and we got to have, you know, something else. I don't know, teriyaki. I really wanted enchiladas. You know, I've historically could get a little bit not so equanimous, suffer about the disappointment, you know. And I noticed that he doesn't suffer too much about the disappointment if the food's not right. It's just like it. So it's so good for me to see that. Like I'm a little weak in that area. He's very strong in that area. And then other areas I have a little more equanimity, right, than maybe someone else. So just checking what areas of our life and just being kind to ourselves. This is a long process. All right, the last phrase today is the freedom and happiness of others is dependent on their actions, not on my wishes for them. The freedom and happiness of others is dependent on their actions, not on my wishes for them. So this goes back to the karma action that we all have to live the results of our actions. And that we have to do the work ourselves. That we can't do it for anyone else, whatever it is. We can't change the effects of their actions for them. We can try. Anybody ever tried that? Oh my gosh. There's a program for that too, called Al-Anon, trying to change other people. And Refuge Recovery. There's recovery for that too. So we're responsible for our actions. Others are responsible for their actions. And this piece about that it's not dependent on our wishes doesn't mean we don't wish them well. This doesn't mean, because that's what we do in a lot of these heart practices. We are wishing for other people to have compassion and appreciative joy, and we're wishing for them to be free from suffering. And we do a lot of this practice where we're wishing this for others because we have compassion and we want others to be free from suffering. So we can continue to wish, but that doesn't mean anybody's going to change. I wish it wasn't true. There's part of me that wishes I could just wish, and then everyone could just get liberated and not make themselves suffer and other people suffer. And wouldn't that be great if we could just sit and wish and have that happen? I think the most powerful way we can maybe encourage people to change is just through our example. That maybe they see us changing, and they see us suffering less, and they see us able to roll through life without being so damn miserable. And they might get inspired, like, what the hell are you doing? And they might want to come along to meditation. But, other people have to learn what they have to learn. They have to go through their process. I've learned this so much in being in recovery rooms for 30 years. We have this saying in recovery rooms that this is not for people who need it, it's for people who want it. It's so tragic. I've seen so many people die behind their addiction and not being able to stop. And their lives, living in addiction and all that comes with it, even though I had so many wishes for them, right? And put a lot of effort in trying to support their sobriety or their being clean. And the wishes that we make, I believe, these intentions that we make when we do these practices where we wish others well, it changes our heart. It changes our mind. It creates a bigger space in our heart, and that we are able to respond. Through wishing well, we're able to respond with kindness. We're able to respond more with patience. This will happen over time as we do these practices. So the last thing that I'll say today on this, that others are responsible for their happiness or suffering, it doesn't come from our wishes, is that, it helps us to let other people live their lives and have their own experience, which is actually a respectful thing. I was in Thailand with a friend of mine, Eric, who he works with developmentally disabled, and they have this at a nonprofit, and they have this saying, it's called the dignity of risk, something like that. And it's about giving even these developmentally disabled kids who need help, right? They need a certain amount of help, but they also need a certain amount of space to make mistakes and have that learning for themselves about what to do and what not to do, as long as it's not super dangerous for them, but that there is some risk, and let people take the risk and figure it out for themselves, and then be loving and kind. Like, that can be a expression of our love, an expression of our kindness. And then the best thing about it is it gives us more time to deal with our own stuff. We're not paying so much attention to what somebody else is doing. We start to turn toward our own experience. So I think that's enough for today. Let's practice together. And we'll do the equanimity meditation training with those phrases. So find your meditation posture. And you're welcome to sit in a chair or on a cushion or on your couch. And we'll begin with the sound of the bell. Find your seat and gently close your eyes. And rest your hands in your lap or on your knees or thighs. And just come into this place of stillness. And bring awareness into your body. And gently scan down your body, releasing any tension that you can let go of. Soften your jaw and your belly. And feel the sensations of sitting, the pressure of your seat on the cushion or the chair. The temperature in the room, the feeling of the air on your skin. And bring attention to your body breathing, the sensations of breathing. As you breathe in, know that you're breathing in. As you breathe out, know that you're breathing out. If your attention gets lost in your mind and thoughts, memories, or plans, no big deal. Just gently bring your awareness back to your breathing. again and again. Now we'll begin this training in equanimity, this mind that's responsive, as a wise response to what's happening. By repeating these meditative phrases. All beings are responsible for their own actions. Suffering or happiness is created through one's relationship to experience, not by experience itself. The freedom and happiness of others is dependent on their actions, not on my wishes for them. We repeat these phrases in our mind over and over like a mantra or a statement of positive intention. You can repeat one or all of the phrases. Training the mind over and over. All beings are responsible for their own actions. Suffering or happiness is created through one's relationship to experience, not by experience itself. The freedom and happiness of others is dependent on their actions, not on my wishes for them. If you get lost in the mind, gently bring your attention back and repeat the phrases. All beings are responsible for their own actions. Happiness or suffering is created through one's relationship to experience, not by experience itself. The freedom and happiness of others is dependent on their actions, not on my wishes for them. All beings are responsible for their own actions. Suffering or happiness is created through our relationship to experience, not by experience itself. The freedom and happiness of others is dependent on their actions, not on my wishes for them. And here for the last few minutes of our meditation this morning, offer yourself some friendliness, some loving kindness. May I be happy. May I be at ease. And may I do the work to free myself from suffering.